Welcome to hour number 3, our third and final on this third full Saturday of the 2024 college football season. It's College Football Today live on SportsGrid. He is the mastermind of the college football pigskin. That is Joe Lisi. He is OK Dubs. That is Kevin Walsh. And I am Ben Stevens. About an hour away from the early window of games. It kicks off at noon Eastern time. Plenty of marquee matchups from the jump. You think about jumping around inside Camp Randall between Wisconsin and Alabama. The Crimson Tide now in the top 5. Ole Miss right alongside. In fact, there's a ton of SEC teams. 6, in fact, ranked inside the top 7 of the AP top 25. We start with Ole Miss, 5th ranked and on the road for their first true road test of the year in Winston-Salem. Joe, an intriguing game. Power competition on both sides, slightly less than a 3-touchdown spread, 20 and a hook in favor of the Run Rebs, who, listen, I know the competition hasn't been great. FCS foe in Furman, Middle Tennessee State without their longtime head coach in Rick Stockstill this year. But they're 2-0 against the spread. They won 52-3 last week, covering as a 42.5-point favorite. And as we shared during the Heisman Trophy talk, Jackson Dart has been the most efficient passer in college football. Can Ole Miss cover as a 3-touchdown favorite today in Wake?
They can, and I've saw this line up around 22.5, 23 in regards to this matchup. You're talking about Jackson Dart, 87% completion percentage, 795 yards, 6 touchdowns. He's added another 2 on the ground, and they're averaging 64 points per game, and they're going up against a defense in Wake Forest that allowed Virginia to steal that game in the last 7 minutes of that matchup at home with a 13-point lead. They put up some points as well. Again, when you look at this matchup, and Wake cost me last week as a 1.5-point favorite. Terrible coaching decision by Dave Clawson, up 13 on a 3rd and 9. Could have ran it, and went for it on 4th and 9. Totally gave the game away. But that being said, the fact that it's right around 3 touchdowns, a little bit more, I'd be inclined to take the points. You have Hank Bachmeier, the former Boise State quarterback that's playing very well, 666 passing yards, 4 tutties, no interceptions. They're averaging, Ben, 361 passing yards per game. Keep an eye out for Donovan Green, a playmaker as well that leads his team in receptions. I don't know if they win it, but I don't think they win it. But they cover this number today, and the over flies through the 64.5.
I am interested to see what the Jackson Dart stat line looks like, because Jackson Dart came out and said, I'm not worried about the Heisman Trophy. Well, then I guess your coach is, because last week in the fourth quarter, 45-3, ball at their own 6-yard line, Jackson Dart is in throwing touchdown passes. And that is what we call the Jaden Daniels playbook. So his passing yards prop today is 323.5. Why so high? They're 21-point favorites. Why would he need to throw the ball that much? Well, because Ole Miss is clearly chasing a Heisman for Jackson Dart. It's clear as day. That's why his numbers look so good. I mean, he has to be able to convert on the opportunities. Yeah. The numbers are absolutely gorgeous and glorious. 87% passes completed. 8 total touchdowns. I mean, again, as we went through the statistics, statistically, he's the guy. And that is by design. So I would just look for Jackson Dart to smash every single number on the table, because that is clearly what Ole Miss is valuing.
Nearly 450 yards of total offense for Dart in the opening half in the season opener against Furman. 6 total touchdowns, 5 through the air. Only that single touchdown last week, but just 7 incompletions for Jackson Dart. Yeah, go ahead.
Listen, can I just say something?
Please.
Does anyone think that if at the end of the year this team's 10-2, people are going to go back and be like, oh, come on, but all his statistics were against Furman and Middle Tennessee and Wake Forest? Does anybody think that? Because nobody did it last year. So I'm just curious, because, listen, I am trying not to derail this show, but I still really can't get over you saying that Jackson Dart hasn't done it against anybody, and then think back to everything we talked about last year.
It's the second game of the year.
I understand that.
He's played nobody. I have to look at it. Look, if Jackson Dart at the start of the year was my pick to win the Heisman, right? He was one of, along with Donovan Edwards. But again, I have to look at it objectively. I mean, the fact that he's put up 87% completion percentage on Middle Tennessee State and Furman, and he's still got to play LSU. He still has to play a handful of teams in
Georgia.
the SEC. Right, Georgia. Let me see you duplicate that type of success against top 10 opponents before I'm buying in.
No doubt about it, right? You have to have those solid performances in the spots where your games are going to be the most significant, but you also need the base level against teams you should beat up on and perform like you're beating up on that team. Jackson Dart so far, the most efficient passer in college football, a passer rating of 247.4. That breaks through the charts. Ole Miss did allow 250 passing yards last week in their game against MTSU, but on 28 rush attempts for the Blue Raiders, just a yard, 0.1 per pop. Henry Parrish Jr., by the way, the Miami transfer, 4 rushing touchdowns last week, 165 yards. And since the start of last season, Wake was just a 4-8 football team last year, now 1-1, blowing a 30-17 lead entering the fourth quarter last week in the ACC opener against Virginia. In Winston-Salem, Wake 5-1 against the spread. It's year 11 under Dave Clawson. It has not been a great last season plus since the beginning of 2023. Kev, it has been so far for Tennessee. Nikki Treats has looked incredible.
No doubt.
That's Nico Iamaleava for Tennessee. In the other ranked versus ranked game last week in Charlotte, they blow out NC State 51-10. Nico was great. Dylan Sampson has been incredibly solid on the ground. You're almost finding those two parts coming together. 2022 was the air raid with Hendon Hooker. Last year, it was all ground game with the trio of backs in Knoxville. So far, the returns have been great for the Vols. Does that continue today as a 49.5-point favorite against Kent State?
So someone texted me today, hey, do you think Tennessee covers that number and just hits the over by themselves? And I said, that's what it looked like was going to happen week 1, and then I got a little shy, and I ultimately didn't bet. I didn't bet it that direction against Chattanooga, but that's exactly what happened. But if you really look at what's been going on with Tennessee and the similarities to the opening that year with Hendon Hooker, game number 1, Ball State 59-10, smashed. Game number 2, ranked Pittsburgh, ACC. They actually won that game in overtime, so this year's result was much better. So you ask yourself, okay, well, maybe a little bit of a letdown. They followed up that game in 2022, hosting Akron, and beat them 63-6. What I am seeing right now from Tennessee, Josh Heupel, Nico Dylan Sampson, is they are going to obliterate teams, and they might be much better than anybody realizes, Joe, because while Nico grabs a lot of the headlines, defensively, they gave up 10 points. They threw a pick. Nico threw a pick 6 in the game. Yeah. I mean, they should be sitting right now on 6 total allowed through 2 games.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're going to see a lot of second and third teamers in regards to this matchup as they move into conference play next week. It's always a cause of concern, and especially in week number 4. I mean, 50 points, though. I mean, we're talking 50 points. We say, it's possible. But, I mean, in terms of that spread, I'm not laying it. Yeah, I would never lay a 50-point spread. I mean, you want to bet Tennessee and you want to take a shot with that type of line, wait first quarter, you get a scoreless 7-8 minutes, you'll be getting a discount 41-42 in regards to that. Again, I'd probably, if you're asking me to bet, this game, I would take the points 49.5 and just hope that they backdoor it somehow, some way.
55.5 is the team total for the Volunteers. Listen, man, Kent State's bad. They had a 2.5 win total entering this season. They lost to St. Francis last week. St. Francis' first ever win as an FCS school against an FBS program. I think Tennessee breaks through their team total today of 55 and a hook. Miami off to a perfect 2-0 start. Kev last week against FAMU, 56-9, even covering as a 46.5-point favorite. Another MAC opponent for the Hurricanes. They take on Ball State at home, 36.5-point favorite. What do you like?
I like Miami to handle business because that's what Miami does here. Right now, Miami is buttoned up and business-like. They destroyed FAMU last week, 56-9. They were laying 46.5 in that game. So all in all, they don't grab the cover. But here's the thing: it doesn't matter. They're not overdoing it. For me, when I look at Miami, I just think about a team that is looking to do a whole lot more than just win an ACC. Early returns, Miami. I mean, I was nice about it over there. That belongs as a top 10 team. You had them at 10. They probably deserve to be a lot higher.
Yeah, I agree. I think Cam Ward breakout day, 258 in regards to the pass defense for Ball State. Multiple inexperienced starters.
Keep an eye on Xavier Restrepo and his receiving yards prop. He's had at least 104 receiving yards in both games. Plenty more to come next.
You say this is a smash, I'm going to run out and smash my button while you talk about Ramondre Stevenson?
I don't think the Bengals defense is one that you should be fearful of. I think they're middle of the pack. They've lost the Bateses and some of those guys over the years that you used to fear. They got a lot of young kids in there who have some talent. But at the same time here, I do expect Ramondre to be a guy that is going to revert back to what he did a couple years ago.
Fantasy Sports Today, only on SportsGrid.
He had 4 grabs in the first half for just over 30 yards, was injured, came back in briefly, and then had to be carted off.
We were pessimistic on Puka Nakua's injury to the same right knee, of that being a nothing, just a bursa, and that's it, as per Sean McVay. We felt there could be a small PCL component.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Everyone had him Rookie of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year. Bears are going to the Super Bowl. Eberflus Coach of the Year. He was terrible.
If he's going to be a success, he's got to play within structure as much as possible. I get it. If the pocket breaks down, throw off the platform. That's fine. But within structure, when the play is there to be made, you need to make it, and he didn't do that.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
147 yards against the Jets and a touchdown? I mean, the numbers are incredible.
It's the Shanahan connection, and that's just what it feels like. And, Jordan Mason came into that game with a career 5.6 yards per carry. He's always been a very tough runner. He's always been good when called upon in small doses. You mentioned the yardage, which was impressive, but 28 carries. That's what I'm looking at.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
The quarterback comparison for our marquee matchups on this third full Saturday of the 2024 campaign. It starts at noon Eastern time in Camp Randall, Madison, Wisconsin, the scene for fourth-ranked Alabama visiting Wisconsin. Now the Crimson Tide, Lisi guy, 16.5-point favorite. Total at 48.5. A lot of the focus will be on the quarterbacks. The guy that can do it all for the Crimson Tide, Jalen Milroe, and a guy that frankly has been disappointing in his first 2 games for the Badgers. That's the Miami transfer in Tyler Van Dyke. Let's start with the home team. If Wisconsin is going to keep this game closer than a 3-score spread indicates, what do the Badgers need out of TVD today?
I think 200 plus, and you have to be aggressive on first down. They can't line up on first and second down, be predictable, and run it with Ches Malusi and those handful of running backs and be in long third down situations, because then they'll be at a predicament, and that'll favor the Alabama front seven to potentially get pressure on Tyler Van Dyke. Even though he's shown an ability to break contain with his legs, he's not as mobile and athletic as clearly Jalen Milroe, and that's the difference in regards to this matchup. He has to. I say it, imperative. They have to get over that number big today, 220, 225 in that area to have a shot to cover this line.
I took a TVD alt, 250 plus, was hanging out around plus 750. It's part of the. I love the over in this football game, so I just think that there's going to be opportunities and he might need to throw the ball. It's on the board that Alabama's pass defense is incredible, though. Time will tell. TJ Finley, the game after playing Badminton for about 350, not the same level of competition, but it gives you an idea that was a player they held under 100. Brown, we know he does his work with the legs, the Bulls quarterback, but they still obviously bottled him up in the passing game. I'm really interested to see what we get from Jalen Milroe, because the way this slate is lined up, I mean, there's a reason this was our game of the day, despite there being another ranked game. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of eyes on this. Assuming they handle business, it's a bye week, and then it's Georgia. And here's kind of the thing with the Heisman Trophy. If Quinn Ewers became the favorite because he beat Michigan, assuming Bama and Kentucky handle business today, what's really going to happen is the favorite for the award is going to come out of the end of the Bama-Georgia game, assuming both of those guys continue to put numbers up here. So that, to me, is something to really keep an eye on, is the Heisman Trophy market, where Milroe could make a move off of a game that's going to have a lot of eyeballs on it.
And that passing yards prop for Milroe up by a full 10. It's 228.5 live right now on various books. Jalen Milroe's passing touchdowns prop 1.5. The over a slight bit of juice, but only minus 118. At least 2 passing touchdowns thrown in the final 3 true road games for Bama a season ago. That was at Texas A&M, at Kentucky, at Auburn. He also had 36 yards on the ground in 3 of the 4 road games a season ago. You might think Wisconsin can take advantage rushing the football today. The Crimson Tide did allow more than 200 yards last week against South Florida, 108 of that, though, from the quarterback in Byram Brown. Our only ranked versus ranked game, the top 25 tilt in Columbia, Missouri. We haven't seen a lot out of Brady Cook so far this year, Joe, in that connection with Luther Burden. 261.5 is his passing yards prop today. He threw for at least 275 yards last year. In all 6 games that Mizzou played against ranked competition, only 1 passing touchdown, has 3 rushing scores. Do you think we see the uptick in Missouri's aerial attack today against BC?
I think we do. They're averaging 44 points per game. I actually took Brady Cook 275 plus in a parlay at plus money because I think they're going to want to push tempo and force the game on Castellanos. We know that Castellanos is good, but Boston College still wants to run the football and then work off of play action. They're averaging 282 passing yards per game. That's what Boston College wants to do. Methodically work down the field the way they did against Florida State, especially on the road. If this becomes a track meet, then it favors Brady Cook, Luther Burden in that passing attack, and that's why I like Cook to get over his number today.
You know, Castellanos is one of those things that with we talk about those quarterback rating numbers. Yeah. The Jackson Dart number 247 points, something.
Yeah.
259.1 for Castellanos so far. I mean, is that even right? Am I even reading that correctly?
I don't want to go off the rails. No, to your point. If he has, let's say, a breakout game.
Castellanos.
Yep. And they beat them by 10. Oh, yeah. Is this a dart? I mean, this is a team that had a 4.5, 5.5 win total. We're talking lottery tickets, right? We're talking 100, 200. Oh. This is a dual threat type of quarterback, just like Jalen Milroe, where if somehow they come out of nowhere to win the ACC.
It's a really good point. Even in the world where they hang, this will have no bearing on their chances to win an ACC. Then they'll play Michigan State. Doesn't matter. Western Kentucky. Doesn't matter. What's the ACC schedule look like? No Miami, no Clemson.
And they've already beat Florida State.
So what's left is Louisville. Guess what? They host Louisville in that football game. A little bit of an extended week because they played Thursday the prior thing before, so they get a little bit of a rest advantage potentially. I don't know if Louisville's off of a bye. It's a good point, though. Where even in a loss today, Joe, Boston College could become that lottery ticket to make a CFP.
Right. Just check the schedule again. I think they got a matchup against the Syracuse Orange, who might be an ACC frontrunner as well.
Front runner, McCord, Fran Brown,
seller's remorse for Ohio State on the McCord.
I mean, Kyle McCord, 4 touchdown passes in both of his first 2 games up in Central New York, and a huge upset victory last week against the ranked side in Georgia Tech. But to your point, realistically, Joe, the ACC is wide open. Yeah. We feel like Miami is the true frontrunner. Clemson bounced back last week against App State. But we're looking for those other teams that can contend for the conference crown. BC could be there. Last week, albeit against Duquesne, FCS foe. Thomas Castellanos, 9 of 10, 234 yards through the air, and 4 touchdowns, 73 rushing yards, and a touchdown against Florida State. And as I shared earlier, in the 2 ranked games that BC played last year against Florida State, albeit a loss, but an easy covers, more than a 2 and 3 touchdown underdog. He had at least 95 yards on the ground, $156 and 2 scores against a good SMU defense in that Fenway Bowl during bowl season. Now, Brady Cook, we will see what they put up today. Kev, you're on Luther Burden.
Yes.
What do you want the passing attack to look like for Mizzou that, frankly, has been a little bit dormant so far?
Yeah, I would say aggressive, right? I think against a team like Boston College who's going to look to run the football, if you play slower tempo, they're going to be right at home, and that's how you allow a team to strike an upset like that. I mean, of course, I'm on the 70.5 with Luther Burden. I think a couple of deep shots to him early on in that game and getting him going because he has takeover game ability in him, Ben.
They haven't had to do much. Missouri is the only team in the country that has shut out each of its first 2 opponents this year. Best scoring defense. They're only giving up $127 on average of total offense as well. We'll see today against a more formidable foe in Boston College. A focus on the state of Oklahoma. Up next.
You say this is a smash. I'm going to run out and smash my button while you talk about Ramondre Stevenson.
I don't think the Bengals defense is one that you should be fearful of. I think they're middle of the pack. They've lost the Bateses and some of those guys over the years that you used to fear. They got a lot of young kids in there who have some talent. But at the same time here, I do expect Ramondre to be a guy that is going to revert back to what he did a couple years ago.
Fantasy sports today, only on SportsGrid.
He had 4 grabs in the first half for just over 30 yards, was injured, came back in briefly, and then had to be carted off.
We were pessimistic on Puka Nakua's injury to the same right knee, of that being a nothing, just a bursa, and that's it, as per Sean McVay. We felt there could be a small PCL component.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Everyone had him rookie of the year, offensive player of the year. Bears are going to the Super Bowl. Eberflus coach of the year. He was terrible.
If he's going to be a success, he's got to play within structure as much as possible. I get it. If the pocket breaks down, throw off the platform. That's fine. But within structure, when the play's there to be made, you need to make it, and he didn't do that.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
147 yards against the Jets and a touchdown? I mean, the numbers are incredible.
It's the Shanahan connection, and that's just what it feels like. And, Jordan Mason came into that game with a career 5.6 yards per carry. He's always been a very tough runner. He's always been good when called upon in small doses. You mentioned the yardage, which was impressive, but 28 carries. That's what I'm looking at.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
An instant classic last week between two schools that are very close to one another, Oklahoma State and Arkansas. The Hogs did cover Lisi guy despite falling in double overtime to Oklahoma State. The Pokes ranked inside the top 15, 13th in the country. In-state showdown as they take the trip from Stillwater to Tulsa. But Oklahoma State still a hefty favorite in this football game, laying 17.5 on the road. You were a fake Oklahoma State fan last year, Kev. You've been on the Cowboys all season long. So what have you made of Oklahoma State in their opening 2 games?
So I'm glad they've won. I really am. My thing is with Ollie Gordon, obviously well known as my guy.
Yeah.
A point I did not get to make a little bit earlier on is how Ashton Genty is a huge problem for my Ollie Gordon Heisman ticket. Because in the race where I'm trying to hope on statistical dominance for Ollie Gordon, you got that.
Yeah, we'll get
while I'm trying to hope on statistical dominance, my concern is not so much Ollie's slow start. 175 yards in 2 games is underneath what we would want that to be. Today he can break out. It's closing the gap on Genty. I don't know if I'll be able at any point to call Ollie Gordon the best running back in football, and that is going to potentially be the issue in him winning a Heisman Trophy.
No, that's a great point, and as the most unbiased man in sports media, right? Ollie Gordon will run for 130 on that SEC defense. 26 carries, 59 yards and 2 touchdowns. That was a gutless effort last week. Come back home, Ollie. I'm with you. Oklahoma State has won 9 straight in the series.
Wow.
Okay? They're going to run all over Tulsa in terms of this matchup. I will say this. This team, Oklahoma State, Big 12 contender, frauds. Alan Bowman, fraud.
Yep.
The secondary, 340 passing, sliced and diced by Taylon Green. They should have won the ball game outright. The 2 biggest coaching decisions, blunders last week. Dave Clawson for Wake Forest and Sam Pittman for Arkansas. 20-20, he's inside the 30-yard line and fails to kick a field goal. Unbelievable. To go up.
You bet Arkansas plus 9.5.
I did.
They did cover.
I did. I did, but I have Ollie Gordon for the Heisman, too. I put Oklahoma State on the map, not you. I bet them to win the Big 12 last year.
And guess what?
And then you saw my success.
And what happened?
And you went back.
And what happened?
And said, no,
you were
I
sitting,
jumped off
you
them.
were sitting,
I jumped off
You were
them.
sitting in
They're
that
frauds.
chair.
They're
and you
wearing
were like,
white jerseys
and you were
and orange pants.
Alan Bowman, please complete a pass. Somebody tackle Xavier Worthy. And you think you're going to get back in Ollie's good graces by calling this team
I am.
gutless?
Life raft.
Okay.
Don't take
Yeah,
this bit.
how about that?
Listen,
They're laying 18.5 today. They steamroll Tulsa.
Listen,
Oh, so you're back in on the
I'm
post.
back. Today I am.
Oh, okay.
The white jerseys, orange
Here's
pants,
the thing,
and
bro.
white helmets.
It's going to look great on the screen.
Now
Great
listen,
on the screen.
Listen, I've learned a lot from
You're
you,
closing.
and I mean that, and you know I mean that.
Yeah.
But let me give you just a little bit of advice. Because pretty soon you're going to be looking for a new Big 12 champion because what you did preseason, that ain't coming home. You might come back home to Oklahoma State. So
No
be
way.
careful selling them. Be careful.
I still like
be
UCF.
careful.
UCF
No,
could
when
be
you come
live.
knocking, I might be willing to let you in.
Maybe.
But I'm not sure if Holly and Bowman will. I'm not sure.
We've seen the Club Heisman, Kev's Heisman
Right.
Club, whatever.
Yeah, all right.
We'll open up the
Yeah,
rope
I
and
know.
see if
Ben
we got
stopped
it.
10 flows.
Cowboys.
I see how it is. I see. Remember Lisi's dealer, whatever that was? We mixed that in 2 years
6
ago.
minutes straight of Lisi
Oh, I
talking.
just saw a
Oklahoma
Gamecocks jersey in
State,
the
by
back.
the way, had allowed nearly 650 total yards last week. Ollie Gordon the second, 17 carries, only 49 yards, and a touchdown. Just his sixth game in the last 16 since the start of last year without at least 100 on the ground. We'll see what they can do against Tulsa. The other Oklahoma team, that being the Sooners, and that would probably offend many in Norman to call them the other Oklahoma team, ranked top 15 in the country, but it hasn't been overly impressive. Last week, OU against Willie Fritz, who used to be the former head coach at Tulane, wins 16-12 at home, but in a tight one against the Cougs, Kev. Both you and Lisi were on Houston as a 4-touchdown underdog, and boy, they covered easily as a 27.5-point dog. Today, Oklahoma gets Willie Fritz's former team in Tulane. Line working against the Sooners, now just 12.5 in favor of OU.
Yeah, I wish I could have got a better number on Tulane because, again, you kind of do some spread math here and where that number closed with K-State. This is a really short number for Oklahoma to lay, but I don't trust them to lay it. I would say there's value in OU, but I don't like them enough to lay that number.
The fact that they lost to Kansas State, I said, the emotional letdown. I really like Mensa, and they could be live. I'm not sold on Jackson Arnold, and I think Oklahoma could be overrated.
Love the freshman from San Luis Obispo. That is Darian Mensa. 342 yards and 2 touchdowns last week against K-State. It's a part of my betting cards. Our betting cards next.
You say this is a smash. I'm going to run out and smash my button while you talk about Ramondre Stevenson.
I don't think the Bengals defense is one that you should be fearful of. I think they're middle of the pack. You know, they've lost the Bateses and some of those guys over the years that you used to fear. They got a lot of young kids in there who have some talent. But at the same time here, I do expect Ramondre to be a guy that is going to revert back to what he did a couple years ago.
Fantasy Sports Today, only on SportsGrid.
He had 4 grabs in the first half for just over 30 yards, was injured, came back in briefly, and then had to be carted off.
We were pessimistic on Puka Nakua's injury to the same right knee, of that being a nothing, just a bursa, and that's it, as per Sean McVay. We felt there could be a small PCL component.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Everyone had him rookie of the year, offensive player of the year. Bears are going to the Super Bowl. Eberflus coach of the year. He was terrible.
If he's going to be successful, he's got to play within structure as much as possible. I get it. If the pocket breaks down, throw off the platform. That's fine. But within structure, when the play's there to be made, you need to make it, and he didn't do that.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
147 yards against the Jets and a touchdown? I mean, the numbers are incredible.
It's the Shanahan connection, and that's just what it feels like. And, Jordan Mason came into that game with a career 5.6 yards per carry. He's always been a very tough runner. He's always been good when called upon in small doses. You mentioned the yardage, which was impressive, but 28 carries. That's what I'm looking at.
Newswire. Only on SportsGrid.
Our full betting cards for the third full Saturday of this 2024 college football season, live right here on College Football Today. Less than 30 minutes away from the start of the noon Eastern time games on this Saturday slate that features 59 FBS college football contests. Not quite the 75 of a week ago, but we love these Saturdays in the fall. Lisi Guy, you are the mastermind of the college football pigskin. Start with the earliest games of the day that kick off at noon Eastern.
Yeah, we'll start in Columbia, South Carolina. We got LSU laying 6.5 against the Gamecocks. Both teams in regards to this matchup, SEC contest. South Carolina picked up the victory last week as a 10.5-point road dog over Kentucky. They're 2-0. Very good home team, and we talk about the season dominance in regards to the series perspective for LSU. 19-2-1 overall all-time against South Carolina. They haven't played there since 2008. Again, it just comes back down to Garrett Nussmeier and that offense, I believe, are more complete than Lenoris Sellers in that passing attack. They're only averaging, South Carolina is 54% in regards to completions, 165 yards per game. I think that's the difference. I think LSU rolls South Carolina, double-digit win, plus Brian Kelly's 670 winning percentage on the road or on the neutral field since the last 7 years. I do like in that game, anytime touchdown, Josh Williams. Hasn't really broken out, 13 carries, 52 yards. Hasn't hit pay dirt, guys, plus 154 to get it today. I think LSU wears them down with the physicality of the offensive line. And then I'm going in an upset. It's a clear, letdown spot, I believe, for the Illini. They get the victory over Kansas as a dog in regards to that matchup. This line against Central Michigan opened up at 18.5. It's ballooned now to 20.5. Give me the Chippewas to keep this game close. Even though Illinois might win, I like Central Michigan to cover this 20.5-point number today.
LSU laying 6.5. The number worked down to 5.5 in favor of the Bayou Bengals. Yesterday, now it's approaching a touchdown once again. South Carolina won its SEC opener last week, the first 2 years under Brian Kelly. In Baton Rouge, the SEC opener was played against Mississippi State, and LSU won both of those two games by at least 2 touchdowns. Lisi Guy did not, as I told you yesterday on Football Full Circle, put LSU minus 6.5 on the card out of respect to you. Didn't want the algo to have to be updated, but you know where my head is. All right, your other plays for the remainder of this Saturday in week number 3.
I'm going to go to the other Columbia. I'm going with Missouri and Brady Cook. On paper, it just seems like they're screaming for you to take Boston College, and I understand that. I do feel Missouri has a speed advantage. They're holding opposing offenses to 18% as well on third down conversions. That's a big factor, especially when you have a quarterback in Castellanos and that rushing attack that want to run it first. I give the edge to Missouri. I think it could be close in the second half. They tack on maybe 1 or 2 scores and cover this number, 16.5 against the Eagles. Later tonight, I like Kentucky. I know the numbers suggest Georgia 14 straight in the series, but the last 4 meetings in regards to Lexington have been very close battles. Kentucky has covered 4 straight. The last 4 games in Lexington against Georgia, this line and how they've lost the last 4 meetings, 10.2 points per game. I think they can run it, make it an ugly scoring game, 22.5. As long as it stays over the key number of 21, guys, I'm taking the points with the Wildcats in a bounce-back spot. We talked about this one, too. Quarterback advantage, I believe UCF now catching 1.5 points against TCU. We have a UCF offense averaging 419 on the ground. I think Jefferson is better than Hoover, and I think Malzahn's a better head coach, even on the road, than Sonny Dykes. So give me UCF in the upset against TCU. Another one, it's my going for the loot, Air Force plus the points. Triple option, very difficult for Baylor to go on the road to Utah. Play a very close game. They covered. They gave up $170 on the ground ground. Now you got to come back home and face the triple option. This is a basically 3-score type of game. Even though Dequan Finn is more athletic, I think Air Force potentially can win this matchup on the road in Waco. The fact that Mertz is starting, I don't care. I think Lagway is the difference for Florida going up against Texas A&M. Not sold on A&M big picture. Certainly not sold with Connor Wegman potentially not playing in this matchup. And we know the success of Napier at home in regards to Gainesville. Give me Florida to potentially strike the upset over Texas A&M. And here's a crazy fact. Virginia Tech and Old Dominion. Home teams won every game in the series. Vatex won 3 at home. ODU's won 2 at home as well. I think this is a bounce-back spot for Virginia Tech. They bucked the trend today, laying 2 touchdowns. They didn't cover against Marshall. They'll cover against ODU in a very close game.
That has been a great rivalry matchup in the Commonwealth, and we've seen some crazy things happen. ODU keeping it close with South Carolina, week number 1, losing by 4, easily covering as close to a 3-touchdown dog. What a difference a week can make for the Gamecocks. Kevin Walsh, a large betting card. As I tally them up here, 11 plays for this third full Saturday. We would have it no other way.
Yeah, let's get involved early here. Noon, Wisconsin-Bama, our game of the week. I'm on over 48.5. Jalen Milroe last year, 4 games on the road. All 4 went over, averaged 35.5 points per game, Alabama. And this offense will look to get out early due to that slow start that they had against South Florida. But when they are clicking, this offense looks like it could be one of the most dangerous in college football. And I don't mind testing this Wisconsin defense here. And I think that offense can surprise some. TVD has plenty of reps against ranked opponents. Last season with Miami, 3 games where he had double-digit pass attempts against ranked teams. 31 or more points in all 3 of those games, including 48 put up on a very talented Texas A&M defense. I think TVD can throw it. I think Bama's going to be ready to rip and roar here. 35-24 is what I'm thinking for a final score in that game, well through your 48.5. I'm agreeing with Joe, and I'm going on card with it because I got to lay the 6 with LSU here. One of my favorites on this slate. This is a spot where South Carolina is getting too much love for beating up a Kentucky team that could be dead in the water. What a disgraceful performance that was from the Wildcats, plus the Gamecocks needed to come out hot after they struggled against ODU. Had LSU and South Carolina played last week after that South Carolina struggle, this line might have been 13.5, maybe even 14. I'm absolutely glad to lay under a touchdown, which is the same thing that I'm going to be doing in Florida State and Memphis. This, to me, is the buy point on FSU. 3 years for Mike Norvell off a bye. He's covered a number. He does it again here with Florida State. Needing it. I don't trust Memphis this year relative to a lot of these G5 teams, so I'm willing to lay that 6.5 there, and I might as well hit your 12:45 spot, Missouri, BC. 14.5 point spread. I would be on Mizzou at a 14, 13.5, but that doesn't look like it's going to show. What is going to show is Luther Burden over 70.5 receiving yards. Last season, over a 30% target share. All of a sudden this year, it's Theo Wease. Well, Wease is banged up heading into this game, and it's the first marquee matchup that Missouri has played. I think their best wide receiver gets flooded with targets and flies over 70.5.
Only 1 touchdown pass for Brady Cook this year, and I know we've stressed this point, but the 1 TD did go to Luther Burden. And last year, against ranked competition, at least 275 yards for Brady Cook in all 6 of those games against a ranked foe. So, Kev, you would have to believe, with 261.5 being the prop today against a BC defense that actually was not bad against the pass last year by ACC standards, second worst rushing defense in the Atlantic Coast Conference this season ago. If we see the uptick in offensive production through the air today for Eli Drinkwitz and Mizzou, Luther Burden's going to be on the receiving end. I think this is a really marquee spot and the only ranked versus ranked top 25 tilt we have today.
Yeah, for me, again, that's why I think Burden is so key in this game, but I thought Lisi made an excellent point earlier on, mentioning the Tom Castellanos breakout could happen here, and then all of a sudden that changes the situation as far as potential Heisman Trophy, not more than an ACC sleeper. I'll also just mention in this window, go for the loot. Alex Orji, 2+ touchdowns. There's absolutely zero reporting that he will start for this team, just like what there was last week where I was hoping that he would play the full game against Texas, and he barely played. I don't care. Apparently, I am Alex Orji's biggest fan. I hope Sharon Moore can join me in that club.
We need 2 touchdowns out of you today for the go for the
20 to 1.
You've given at least 1 score of 2 in the first 2 full weeks of this college football season. I'll give you a play for Alabama and Wisconsin on the other side so we can round out the early window, and then we dive through the rest of the betting cards on the other side of the break here on College Football Today.
You say this is a smash. I'm going to run out and smash my button while you talk about Ramondre Stevenson.
I don't think the Bengals defense is one that you should be fearful of. I think they're middle of the pack. They've lost the Bateses and some of those guys over the years that you used to fear. They got a lot of young kids in there who have some talent. But at the same time here, I do expect Ramondre to be a guy that is going to revert back to what he did a couple years ago.
Fantasy Sports Today, only on SportsGrid.
He had 4 grabs in the first half for just over 30 yards, was injured, came back in briefly, and then had to be carted off.
We were pessimistic on Puka Nakua's injury to the same right knee, of that being a nothing, just a bursa, and that's it, as per Sean McVay. We felt there could be a small PCL component.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Everyone had him rookie of the year, offensive player of the year. Bears are going to the Super Bowl. Eberflus coach of the year. He was terrible.
If he's going to be a success, he's got to play within structure as much as possible. I get it. If the pocket breaks down, throw off the platform. That's fine. But within structure, when the play is there to be made, you need to make it, and he didn't do that.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
147 yards against the Jets and a touchdown? I mean, the numbers are incredible.
It's the Shanahan connection, and that's just what it feels like. And, Jordan Mason came into that game with a career 5.6 yards per carry. He's always been a very tough runner. He's always been good when called upon in small doses. You mentioned the yardage, which was impressive, but 28 carries. That's what I'm looking at.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Live right here on College Football Today. We're less than 20. Our first set of games here on this third full Saturday. One of the marquee spots on the top 10 unit, allowing just 108 yards in 2021 rather. They were the nation's best rushing defense in the country. Jim Leonard is not there. Under Luke Fickell now, the defense has looked a little bit different. But here's the concern for me when it comes to this matchup. Alabama can run it. Is it Jam Miller? Is it Jalen Milroe? Is it Justice Haynes? I actually look at Haynes at 54.5. Now, split backfields, multiple players that can run the football can be slightly concerning. But Justice Haynes in the opener against Western Kentucky, 4 carries, 102 yards, a touchdown. Jam Miller, the leading rusher last week against South Florida, 15 carries for $140 and a score against the Bulls. But just because he was the leading rusher did not mean that Haynes did not get his. He still had 13 carries against USF. So I like the number 54.5 for Justice Haynes, Kev, for Alabama today against Wisconsin. That's the one play that I have early, everything in the afternoon and in the evening hours. So now back to your betting card for week 3.
By the way, Haynes was a look for me as well. That number climbed a little bit up from 50.5 as well, so I think it's a strong look. Purdue Notre Dame under 47.5. I in the midst of the madness kind of forgot to break this thing down. Here's a hot take for you. Hudson Card completing 96% of his passes is a bad thing considering he threw for less than 300 yards. That's a lot of dink and dunk. You look at what he did last year against Michigan and Ohio State. Maybe I'm nuts for allowing Notre Dame's defense to compare to those, but I'm going to still do that. 135 yards per game on 30 attempts, which was good for 4.5 yards per pass attempt. I do not trust Purdue to move it. Notre Dame's quarterback's injured. I don't trust them to move it at all. This spread has been dropping. The total's been climbing. Not buying it under 47.5. We've got the under in Pittsburgh, West Virginia at 62. Backyard brawl last year. This game 17-6. Also, total was listed significantly lower, closer to around 47.5. I'm not buying this Pitt offensive explosion. They were at 6 points deep into that game last week against Cincinnati until they saved their lives. Maybe saved Narduzzi's job. Under. Backyard brawl 62. Florida +4. I know this is a moving number. If it's under 3, I actually would just completely stay away from a weird one with a lot of quarterback questions. But Mertz is going to play here. I'm fine with that. Lagway is going to get involved. This is the statement spot for Florida. Billy Napier, job on the line, undeniable. undeniably. Favorite spread of the day, that's UTSA plus 35.5. Jeff Traylor's gone to Texas before with his group and stayed inside. 5 touchdowns. He lost that game by 21, so I'm good with that. You also consider last year against Wyoming after beating Bama on the road. Texas at home laid 28.5. They was tied going into the fourth quarter. They only won that game by 21. UTSA hangs here. This is a 4-score game, no more than that. UCLA plus 3.5. I want to fade some of these Big Ten teams when they go out west, considering the schedule spot is also great for UCLA with the fact that they're coming off of a bye. They have to get the job done against Indiana. I'll take the field goal here. I'll take Northern Iowa plus 30.5. Nebraska completely dumps it to get through Colorado last week. I think now with two teams looking to run the football here, it's going to be tough to extend and get out and win this game by 35-42, which is what you'd be looking for on a 30.5-point number. And basketball, baby, UConn plus 16.5. Let's see what Dan Hurley draws up here and see what we can get involved with UConn. All in all, this number for UConn going to Maryland was 18.5. I think Maryland is definitely more than 2 points better than what we've seen from Duke early season, who had to miraculously come back against Northwestern. I like UConn plus 16.5. A lot of dogs.
So I will start with the Terps then, because Maryland great in non-conference play. Under Mike Locksley, who became the full-time head coach in College Park at the beginning of the 2019 season, the Terrapins are 15-1 straight up in non-conference action. It's the battle of the DMV tonight. They're on the road in Charlottesville against the Cavaliers. Yes, Anthony Calandria led a comeback for the Wahoos last week in the fourth quarter in that victory against Wake. But Maryland is 15-1 in non-conference play. In Big Ten play, the Terps at home last week lost outright as an 8.5-point home favorite against Michigan State. They're 14-28 straight up in Big Ten action under Locksley. We're just putting it to test once again, as we did week 1 when Maryland absolutely ran UConn out of the gym. Maryland, moneyline, minus 118 on the road today against UVA. Vanderbilt makes the card, lay a 9.5. That is the case for Vandy today on the road, taking on Georgia State. A Georgia State team now without Sean Elliott, who is the tight ends coach for South Carolina. They made a bowl game for the last 5 years. It's been very different this year for the Panthers. They got routed by Georgia Tech in the opener, did not cover as a 3-touchdown dog. Last week beat Chattanooga as a double-digit favorite by 3. A Chattanooga team that lost to Tennessee 69-3. Diego Pavia has been great for the Commodores. Vanderbilt covers this number. They're a perfect 2-0 against the spread. They're laying less than double digits. I like it. We see it differently when it comes to tonight in the Rose Bowl. I believe in this Indiana team. I got it earlier in the week at 2.5. It has moved north of a field goal. There's not exactly the same key numbers in college football that there is in the National Football League. I think this game is close. I like IU laying less than 3. Curtis Rourke has been great in the Wake Forest transfer. Justice Ellison, I think, provides a boost for this Indiana offense. Defensively, sure, competition has not been great this year. FIU and Western Illinois. But the Hoosiers have only allowed 32.5 rushing yards per game. That's the best in college football at this moment. If UCLA struggles on the ground like they did in Honolulu week 1 against Hawaii, Indiana wins this game comfortably. Utah State under 43.5. No Cam Rising. What did Utah do last week in the second half? They scored 6 points. They scored 17 points on 3 of their first 4 offensive possessions when Cam Rising was in there. 2 touchdowns, field goal. Without him in the second half, stagnant, a heavy dose of the ground game. I think it's short today against Utah State in Logan to get ready for the Big 12 opener next week against Oklahoma State. No Cam Rising. We'll see what they do. Utah State's quarterback, Bryson Barnes, against his former team in the Utes. They were blanked last week, shut out by USC. The Trojans' first defensive shutout since 2011, under 43.5. Darian Mensah over 195 and a hook. The quarterback for Tulane. This on the rise by 10 yards. I think he does well against Oklahoma today. I think the number is too short. 324 last week against K-State, and I already gave you Justice Haynes over 54.5. It's a rivalry weekend, by the way. We didn't talk about a 128th all-time meeting between Miami of Ohio and Cincinnati. The big battle for the victory bell. The Redhawks covers a 3.5-point home underdog. More next.
You say this is a smash. I'm going to run out and smash my button while you talk about Ramondre Stevenson.
I don't think the Bengals defense is one that you should be fearful of. I think they're middle of the pack. They've lost the Bateses and some of those guys over the years that you used to fear. They got a lot of young kids in there who have some talent. But at the same time here, I do expect Ramondre to be a guy that is going to revert back to what he did a couple years ago.
Fantasy Sports Today, only on SportsGrid.
He had 4 grabs in the first half for just over 30 yards, was injured, came back in briefly, and then had to be carted off.
We were pessimistic on Puka Nakua's injury to the same right knee, of that being a nothing, just a bursa, and that's it, as per Sean McVay. We felt there could be a small PCL component.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Everyone had him rookie of the year, offensive player of the year. Bears are going to the Super Bowl. Eberflus coach of the year. He was terrible.
If he's going to be a success, he's got to play within structure as much as possible. I get it. If the pocket breaks down, throw off the platform. That's fine. But within structure, when the play is there to be made, you need to make it, and he didn't do that.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
147 yards against the Jets and a touchdown? Man, the numbers are incredible.
It's the Shanahan connection, and that's just what it feels like. And, Jordan Mason came into that game with a career 5.6 yards per carry. He's always been a very tough runner. He's always been good when called upon in small doses. You mentioned the yardage, which was impressive, but 28 carries. That's what I'm looking at.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
We're about 5 minutes away from the start of week number 3 and the third full Saturday of this 2024 college football season. Kevin Walsh, Joe Lisi, and Ben Stevens. A lot of the marquee matchups that you will see today are CFT game of the week, games of the week in the early window. 2 at noon Eastern time, one that kicks about 45 minutes later in Columbia, Missouri. 2 games in Columbia, one in South Carolina, the other in Missouri. But we start in Camp Randall. Alabama's first trip to Madison, Wisconsin since 1928. The 4th-ranked Crimson Tide, Kev, a 16.5-point road favorite against Wisconsin. It is a banner game from a proud program perspective. Both, of course, carry national weight. But this Wisconsin team, not exactly what they have been in the last decade. Can the Badgers keep it closer than the 3-score spread indicates?
The big picture aspect of it we haven't really attacked today, despite it not being a amazing slate. There's still so many games to get through. But Luke Fickell is very close to getting into those crosshairs that many recent hires have been put in by a guy like a Joe Lisi who attacks Mario Cristobal. But I'm being serious.
No, you're right.
Luke Fickell gets smashed here today. It's not just about, they're 2-1. It's Bama. Well, what is the rest of the season going to look like for Wisconsin here? I'm not involved with the spread. You guys know this. I'm on the over 48.5. I think both offenses can beat expectations today. I've mentioned 35-24 as the final score, which would certainly be inside that number here. But I think this game is more likely to be in the 60s than it is to be under this 48.5 number here, Joe.
So I agree with you in regards to Fickell. Could have had any job 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Could have went to USC, opted to go to Wisconsin. And a lot of people pick this team as being a dark horse in the Big Ten.
I loved them.
They played down to the level of competition. This is potentially the biggest game, Ben, and maybe in the last decade for Wisconsin. And I say that because, Michigan's been there and everything else. We know about the Big Ten opponents. This is Alabama. This is why you got Luke Fickell here. And again, I don't like the total, so I'll root it in for you. But I'm going to take the 16.5. Now, full disclosure, I altered it up to 30.5 with a couple other teams. I have a little bit of cushion, but I do have 16.5. 16.5. It's all dependent upon Tyler Van Dyke. If I had to take it right now again, I would take the 16.5.
I'm going to make, but because I saw your reaction of where does this rank in Wisconsin games? The fact that this doesn't feel like a big game says a lot. Also, any angle on fickle revenge with Cincinnati making the CFP and losing to Bama? Anything on that? I'd say no.
I think for him it's more building Wisconsin back up. 2015, these two teams met in Dallas. Alabama won that game comfortably. They covered easily as a 12.5-point favorite. But here you have Wisconsin at home in Camp Randall, one of the vaunted home environments in college football. You shouldn't be catching more than 2 touchdowns. Wisconsin, in fact, has only been an underdog 3 times in the last 3 years. They are 2-1 against the number, 0-3 straight up. Them and Ohio State, who's also only been booked as a dog twice in the last 3 years. The only teams in FBS college football without a victory outright in the last 3+ seasons now as an underdog. This a huge game to restore some confidence in Wisconsin. 23.5 points per game last year offensively. Their first time averaging less than 24 points per game in the last 10 years for this Badgers offense. Let's go to Columbia. We'll see dealer's choice what our producers do next. Oh, Columbia, Missouri at 12:45 p.m. Eastern. 16.5 point spread now in favor of Missouri against BC. Total 52.5. Lisi guy. Thank you, Joe. LSU will be next. We get that. Top 25 tilt, our only ranked versus ranked game of this Saturday slate. It's ranked versus ranked, but it's still supposed to be a comfortable Missouri win. How do you see it playing out?
Down to 14.5. I laid it with Brady Cook. I think they have a speed advantage, and I like the defense playing at home. I like Missouri to cover this line.
Do you know any good songs by Luther Vandross?
Ooh, Luther
Vandross. A little Anita.
There we go.
That's not Luther Vandross.
No, okay, all right. So it looks like we don't know much Luther Vandross. I do know Luther Burden, though, over 70.5 receiving yards. I think this is his breakout game today against Boston College. It's a buy low spot. That number was 74.5 overnight. It's been dropping.
56.5, Thomas Castellanos. That's his rushing yards number. He was great against ranked foes last year, obviously 73 rushing yards and a score against Florida State to start this season. LSU is next. So we go to the other Columbia. That's South Carolina. Keep an eye on the weather. Not expected to be great. The total working its way down to 47.5. Kev, 6.5 points in favor of the Bayou Bengals. Less than a touchdown. Do they cover?
I like it, but he said it. Go ahead.
No, I like it too. The series
Don't
dominated by LSU in the trenches. A little kryptonite peeking its head up on Twitter.
Yeah.
We bring it home. Double-digit win. Best bet on the board. Family.
South Carolina has been great defensively in their first 2 games. Was last week in the opener against Kentucky. Can LSU run it? Just 66 yards on the ground against Nichols last week.
UTSA
He's Kevin
bailout.
Walsh. He is Joe Lisi. I'm Ben Stevens. Week 3 Saturday starts right now.
Check Panther.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
You know what? What can one of these quarterbacks or wide receivers do for me this year to make a wager? It's got to be the running conditions there for Jaden Daniels.
In regards to Jaden Daniels, you know I was on him in regards to the Heisman Trophy. I actually think he's going to do it on the ground, through the air. 40 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, playing in Cliff Kingsbury's offense where he wants to spread it and throw it. I think he's going to put up dynamic numbers.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
The only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
New to the Live Golf Plus app. Watch Live Golf any way you want it. Follow any group. Replay any shot. Anytime, anywhere. Any questions? Watch Live Golf live and on demand.
He had 4 grabs in the first half for just over 30 yards, was injured, came back in briefly, and then had to be carted off.
We were pessimistic on Puka Nakua's injury to the same right knee, of that being a nothing, just a bursa, and that's it. as per Sean McVay. We felt there could be a small PCL component.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.